Tonight, a dispute between the clerk of the district court and the Douglas County Board of Mental Health.
First Alert 6's Andrew Pfeiffer has what both parties are alleging about each other. He joins us live in the studio. Andrew?
Brian, Aaron, this morning, Douglas County Clerk Crystal Rhodes held a press conference. She alleged that the County Board of Mental Health is mishandling a variety of cases and patients, posing a risk to public safety. In response, the board held a press conference of their own this afternoon.
This is creating a serious threat to public safety and significant liability to the taxpayers of Douglas County.
I can't figure out the logic behind any of her allegations or her complaints.
A concern rising for 2 years is now coming to light in Douglas County.
Since assuming office in 2023, I've discovered several disturbing civil rights violations within the board and their administration.
Clerk of the District Court Crystal Rhodes alleges the Board of Mental Health is not doing their job efficiently. She cites several allegations including hearing delays, indefinite continuances, and not addressing non-compliant subjects.
But I feel very strongly that no one should be murdered or have to worry about sex trafficking because people are refusing to do their jobs and hold a few more hearings.
In 2023, Rhodes requested the Board of Mental Health hearings be moved to Douglas County Courthouse. She also requested for them to have more frequent hearings, but the board refused on both accounts.
These hearings are done with the providers telling whether they need more time to treat people. And once you get committed, you lose all kinds of civil rights.
Michael McClellan represented the Board of Mental Health Tuesday afternoon in response to Rhodes' allegations.
There's just no merit to them. That's her biggest problem, is there's no merit to any of this.
McClellan claims the dispute is causing issues with the board's ability to function, and they filed an order to keep the clerk's office out of future hearings. All 17 Douglas County judges signed and approved that order.
I am interpreting this most recent order as retaliation for my persistence in attempting to force a correction of deficiencies in the administration of the Board of Mental Health.
Because Rhodes can no longer attend the meetings, she tells me she hopes to create public pressure for the board to change their practices.
It should be stressed that the majority of people suffering from mental illness are not a danger to the public. However, some of the subjects under the care of the Board of Mental Health are, and we are failing those people as well as our community.
McClellan claims that Rhodes' knowledge is not sufficient enough to make any allegations.
She hasn't gotten the advice of a lawyer, and she just doesn't understand how the process works or how it benefits people with a severe and persistent mental illness.
Reporting in Omaha, Andrew Pfeiffer, First Alert 6.
A couple of important notes here. There is currently no legal action taken by either side, and Rhodes did submit her bid to Congress just 2 weeks ago.